Let us talk about a story that has confused many people. A story that critics of Islam have used to attack the Prophet. A story that even some Muslims struggle to understand. The story of Zaynab bint Jahsh, the woman whom the Prophet married after she was divorced from his adopted son, Zayd ibn Harithah. On the surface, this seems strange. Why would a man marry the ex-wife of his own son? In our world today, this would be considered inappropriate, even forbidden. And yet, the Prophet did exactly that, and he did it not by his own choice, but by the command of God. Today, we are going to uncover the full story. We are going to look at the history, the context, and the powerful reason behind this marriage. And when you understand what really happened, you will see that this was not a scandal. It was a revolution that changed Arab society forever and brought justice to millions of people. Let us begin by introducing the people in this story. First, there is Zayd ibn Harithah. Zayd was a slave. As a young boy, he was taken from his family and sold in the markets of Mecca. He was given as a gift to the Prophet before the first revelation ever came. But the Prophet did not keep him as a slave. He freed him. He looked at this boy who had no one, and he said, "You are my son." From that day, Zayd was called the son of Muhammad. The love between them was so deep that when Zayd's father came to take him back, Zayd was given a choice. He looked at his own father and said, "I will never leave this man. He has treated me like a son." The Prophet honored Zayd. He raised him. He loved him. And when the time came, he arranged a marriage for him. That marriage was to Zaynab bint Jahsh. Zaynab was from a noble family. She was the cousin of the Prophet. She came from the Banu Asad tribe, a family of honor and status. She was also a woman of strong faith. She was among the first to accept Islam, among the first to believe when most of Mecca rejected the message. She was intelligent. She was proud. She was a woman who knew her worth. Now, on paper, this marriage seemed like a good match. The Prophet wanted to honor Zayd. He wanted to show that in Islam, a former slave could marry into the highest families. There was no caste system in Islam. No one was too low to marry someone of high status. But the marriage did not work. Zayd and Zaynab were different. Zaynab came from a noble background. She was proud. She had a certain way of life, certain expectations. Zayd had been a slave. He was gentle, humble, but the weight of the past was always there. And the society around them never fully accepted the marriage. People whispered. They looked down on them. They said things that hurt. Inside the marriage, there was tension. Zayd tried. He tried very hard. He went to the Prophet and told him that things were not working. The Prophet told him to stay with his wife, to fear God, to be patient. He said to Zayd, "Keep your wife to yourself and fear God." The Prophet wanted this marriage to succeed. He wanted to show that in Islam, a marriage between a former slave and a noblewoman could work, that the old prejudices could be overcome. But it did not. The pain between them was too deep. Eventually, the marriage ended in divorce. And in that divorce, something greater was waiting to be born. After the divorce, something happened. God revealed verses of the Quran to the Prophet, verses that would change the way Arab society thought about family, about adoption, about marriage. The verses are in Surah Al-Ahzab, the 33rd chapter of the Quran, and they commanded the Prophet to marry Zaynab. The Prophet was hesitant. He knew what people would say. They would say that he married his son's ex-wife. They would gossip. They would mock. But God said to him in the Quran, "You hide within yourself what God is about to reveal. You fear the people, but God has more right to be feared." This was a command from God. The Prophet could not refuse. So why did God command this marriage? What was the purpose? The answer lies in one word: adoption. In pre-Islamic Arabia, adoption was treated as blood relation. When a man adopted a child, that child was considered exactly like a biological son. He inherited from the father. He was called by the father's name, and most importantly, the adopted son's wife was considered like a daughter-in-law. Marrying her after divorce was forbidden, just like marrying the ex-wife of a biological son was forbidden. This custom was deeply rooted. It was considered shameful, even unthinkable to break it. But God wanted to break it. because this custom caused injustice. It created barriers. It prevented people from marrying who they should marry. It treated adopted children as if they were biological, which they were not. And it caused pain and hardship for many families. God wanted to teach the Muslim community that adoption does not create blood ties. An adopted son is not a real son. He is a person who deserves love and care, but he does not have the same legal status as a biological child. And by marrying Zaynab after Zayd divorced her, the Prophet was showing the entire community that this custom was over, that what was once forbidden was now permitted, that the old way was gone and a new way, a just way, had come. The Quran makes this clear. It says, "Muhammad is not the father of any of your men, but he is the messenger of God and the seal of the prophets." This verse was revealed to end the practice of calling adopted sons by the father's name. It was to establish that adoption does not create a true father-son relationship. And then the Quran says, "When Zayd had completed his need of her, we married her to you so that there would be no blame on the believers regarding the wives of their adopted sons." This verse tells us clearly, the marriage happened so that this rule would be established, so that no Muslim after that would feel shame or hesitation about marrying the divorced wife of an adopted son. The Prophet took the hardest step, the step that everyone would criticize, to open a door for the community. He took the judgment of society upon himself so that others would not have to suffer. Now let us look at what this marriage meant for the people at that time. When the Prophet married Zaynab, the whispers began. The hypocrites, the ones who pretended to believe but carried hatred in their hearts, they saw their chance. They spread rumors. They said, "Muhammad married his son's wife." They thought they had found a weapon to use against him. But the revelation came down to silence them. It told them, clearly and finally, that Zayd was not the son of the Prophet. He was a beloved companion, a man of honor, but he was not a blood son. And the marriage was lawful. But more than that, the revelation established a principle that would change Arab society forever. From that day forward, no adopted child would be called by the name of his adoptive father. Every child would keep his own father's name. Every child would be known by his true lineage. And the door was opened for marriages that were once considered forbidden. A woman divorced from an adopted son was no longer off limits. A barrier that had caused pain and injustice for generations was shattered. All of this came from that one marriage, the marriage that the Prophet was commanded to enter, even though he knew people would talk, even though he knew the whispers would follow him for centuries. He did it anyway, because it was the truth, and the truth was more important than his reputation. Let us also look at Zaynab herself. She was a woman of great faith. When she learned that the Prophet was commanded to marry her, she did not act with pride. She said, "I did not arrange this marriage. It was God who arranged it from the heavens." She knew that she was part of something bigger than herself. She was an instrument of God's will. And she became one of the most honored wives of the Prophet. She was known for her piety, her generosity, and her deep devotion. She used to say, "Among the wives of the Prophet, I am the one who was given the most difficult test, and I am the one who was given the greatest honor." She understood the weight of what she was part of. And what about Zayd? He was not forgotten. He remained beloved to the Prophet. He continued to be a respected companion. He later led armies for Islam. He was martyred in battle, and the Prophet wept for him deeply. This was not a story of rejection. It was a story of transformation, a story of how God uses the lives of ordinary people to bring about lasting change. Now let us step back and look at the bigger picture. Why is this story so important? Because it shows us something about the Prophet that we often forget. The Prophet did not live for himself. He did not make decisions based on what people would say. He did not avoid difficulty to protect his reputation. He lived for God. He lived to deliver the message. And when God commanded him to do something that would bring criticism, he did it. He did it without hesitation. He did it knowing that people would talk about him for centuries. And he did it so that the community after him would have clear guidance. He took the burden so that we would not have to carry confusion. This story also shows us that Islam is a religion of justice. The old custom of treating adopted children as blood children caused real harm. It prevented marriages. It created false barriers. It confused families. Islam came to remove that harm, to establish what is right, to make clear what is lawful and what is not, and the Prophet was the instrument of that change. He did not create the custom. He did not support it. He broke it. By his marriage to Zaynab, he shattered an old tradition and replaced it with a new one, a tradition of truth, a tradition of clarity, a tradition of mercy. And let us think about Zaynab herself, a woman whose name is mentioned in the Quran, a woman who was chosen by God for a specific purpose, a woman who accepted her role with grace and faith. She is an example for every Muslim who faces difficulty, who is tested, who wonders why things happen to them. She trusted God, and God honored her. If you have watched this far, you are someone who wants to understand. You are someone who does not shy away from difficult questions. You are someone who wants to see the Prophet clearly, honestly, without the filters of gossip or misunderstanding. That is what the Prophet path is all about. We tell these stories so that you can see the wisdom behind every action of the Prophet. We explore the difficult topics so that you can find the truth. And we do it all with love for the Prophet and respect for the message he brought. So please, if you have not already, hit that subscribe button. Join this path. Share these videos with your family and friends, because the story of the Prophet is not just history, it is guidance for our lives today. And the more we understand it, the better we can walk in his footsteps. Thank you for listening. Thank you for seeking the truth. And until the next video, remember that the Prophet did not live for himself. He lived for God. He lived for his community. He lived for you. And every difficult step he took was a step to make the path easier for those who would come after him. That is the mercy of the Prophet. That is the mercy that God sent to all the worlds.